8 scaring and interesting real historical facts very hard to believe. 1. In the Middle Ages, some conflicts between husband and wife were resolved by a duel. Domestic violence is a severe problem. In the Middle Ages, they found a very original way to resolve disputes between spouses, not to prohibit them, but to legitimize them. So, the book of 1467 by the duelist Hans Talhofer called Fechtbuch, Fencing Manual, describes the rules for conducting court fights between spouses. A man sitting waist-deep in an earthen pit was armed with a club. His wife was given a bag with a stone weighing 4 or 5 pounds, 1.5 to 2 kilograms. Any techniques were allowed. The judge determined the winner. 2. 60 nobles of the Holy Roman Empire drowned in feces in Erfurt. Once, 2 powerful gentlemen, Louis III, Landgrave of Thuringia, and Conrad of Wittelsbach, Archbishop of Mainz, quarreled. Some tension had long been felt between Thuringia and Mainz, and the archbishop decided to build a castle on the border with a potential enemy in Heiligenberg just in case. The Landgrave said that this was a provocation and decent archbishops do not act like this, and therefore now he is obliged to organize an invasion of Mainz. Emperor Henry VI, passing by on business, he wanted to make war with Poland, nothing special, decided to help the gentlemen reconcile. To do this, he organized a diet, that is, a meeting of important people, in the city of Erfurt. If Louis, Conrad, and Heinrich met face to face, there would be nothing to talk about. But in the Middle Ages, things were not done like that, so everyone entered the negotiations with a considerable entourage. In addition, they were joined by a nobility from all over the Holy Roman Empire, some on a serious occasion, some counting on a banquet. In summary, on July 25, 1184, more than 100 people gathered for negotiations in St. Peter's Cathedral in Erfurt. And when the meeting began, the wooden floor beneath them, not designed for such weight and rotted, collapsed. Monsignors fell, broke through the next floor with their bodies, and finally collapsed into a giant septic tank under the monastery. A septic tank that has not been cleaned for many years. As a result, more than 60 people died, some from injuries during a fall, others drowned in tons of excrement. Among the dead were such respected gentlemen as Gosmer III, the Counts of Ziegenhain, Beringer I von Meldingen, and Friedrich of Abenberg, and other important people. As you can see, not only in the Game of Thrones, nobles have a hard time. Louis III floundered in the septic tank, but they pulled him out. The archbishop also survived by sitting next to the window. And King Henry, at that time, retired to a niche toilet with a stone floor. In those days, such places in castles were delicately called wardrobes. He had to wait, sitting in the lavatory, while the servants brought a ladder and removed him from the second floor of the collapsed building. After that, His Majesty became disillusioned with diplomacy and left Erfurt. 3. Pope Formosus was put on trial after being exhumed. In January 897, Pope Stephen VI accused his predecessor, Formosa, of heresy. This was the most popular way in Rome to remove an objectionable hierarchy, to call him a heretic and anathematize him. Something like a cancellation culture, only for popes. The fact is that Formosus anointed the wrong person to reign the Holy Roman Empire, Arnulf of Carinthia, from the Carolingians. After the short-lived Emperor Arnulf was paralyzed, another king, Lambert of Spoleto, began to claim the title. Formosa's decision urgently needed to be cancelled in court, pretending that this was not the Pope but a traitor to the Church. And it doesn't matter who he anointed there. There was, however, one snag. Formosus died safely 9 months before the start of the meeting, so he could not come to court, which is reasonably expected. But the fact of the defendant's death did not stop the justice machine. The orderly decomposed corpse was pulled out of the tomb, dragged through the streets, taken to the Lateran Basilica, dressed in papal clothes, and put on the throne. Pope Stephen accused the corpse of perjury, violation of canon law, and misappropriation of the title of bishop and began the interrogation. Naturally, it was not Formosus himself who answered, but a deacon hiding behind the back of the throne, imitating the voice of the deceased. As a result of the meeting, the corpse was found guilty. All his decisions, including the anointing of Arnulf, were declared null and void. 3 fingers were cut off, which he used for blessings during his lifetime. His papal vestments were torn off and buried in a cemetery for the mob. The adventures of Formosa did not end there. He was exhumed again, apparently by grave diggers who hoped to profit from something. But since the excommunicated pope was buried without honors, the robbers did not find anything of value, tied a load to the corpse, and threw it into the Tiber River. The late ex-pope surfaced, fishermen found him, and, according to the historian Liutprand of Cremona, brought him to the church of the Blessed Prince of the Apostles Peter. There, the remains of Formosa are rumored to have begun to work miraculous cures. In addition, they recalled that during the corpse synod an earthquake damaged the Lateran temple, which further convinced the mob of the holiness of Formosa. A little later, the new pope, John IX, restored Formosa in his rights, buried him in the papal tomb with honors, and forbade him to continue to carry out a trial of the dead. And sometime later, the next pope, Sergius III, canceled this decision and again declared Formosus a heretic and ordered him to leave an inscription on the grave of Stephen VI. What a fine fellow that Formosa exposed. For the 3rd time, they decided not to exhume the poor fellow, and he remained to rest in St. Peter's Basilica. 4. Indian Galvarino fought with the Spaniards without hands. When the Spanish conquistadors conquered South America, they faced fierce resistance from the Mapuche Indians or Araucanas. Nearly 150 Mapuche were captured after a fierce battle in Araucania in 1557. Most of the prisoners were ordered by the governor of Chile, Garcia Hurtado de Mendoza, to cut off their right hand and nose. And the most ferocious warrior named Galvarino was cut off both hands at once. He was excellent in battle. If you think that losing limbs stopped Galvarino, then you are mistaken. He attached a pair of knives to his stumps and continued to fight the Spaniards. Galvarino, even without hands, laid down a mountain of conquistadors at the Battle of Milarapu. In the end, the Spaniards nevertheless prevailed, killed almost 3,000 Mapuche, and fed Galvarino alive to the dogs. 5. The Romans used urine for washing and brushing their teeth. The Romans were generally exciting guys. For example, they were very ingenious in their use of urine. Since it contains a lot of ammonia, which has bleaching properties, it was used as a laundry detergent. Specially trained people called fullo worked in laundries. They dipped worn togas into vats of settled urine and then trampled them underfoot. They were then washed in water with ashes or clay. This made it possible to clean the fabric of fat. Human urine was also used in tanning leather, treating sheep, by pouring urine into their throats, and, according to the Roman historian Columella, was used as fertilizer for growing pomegranates. Urine was so essential to the Roman economy that Emperor Vespasian taxed the public latrines that sold it. To his son Titus, when asked if his father had gone crazy, he reasonably answered, "Money doesn't smell." And for dessert, here is the most original use of urine among the Romans. They rinsed their mouths with it to make their teeth whiter. Interestingly, it even makes some sense thanks again to ammonia. Fortunately, not everyone, apparently, made such sacrifices, but only the most desperate snobs who valued a snow-white smile. For example, the historian Catullus ironically mentions one such original named Ignatius. 6. The Roman Empire was auctioned. By the way, one more thing about the Romans. There was one unpleasant period in the history of Rome, the year 193, during which 5 emperors were replaced on the throne. Emperor Commodus, the same one played by Joaquin Phoenix in Gladiator, was, in reality, an extraordinary guy. He loved to fight in the arena against real fighters, but he often scored on the empire's affairs. And besides, he suffered from paranoia and liked to kill his consuls just in case. Otherwise, they would suddenly think of something. Unsurprisingly, those close to him decided to eliminate him and appoint a better ruler carefully. It didn't work out right. An attempt to poison Commodus failed because the emperor vomited. His personal Greco-Roman wrestling coach, Narcissus, had to be hastily bribed to strangle Commodus while taking a bath together. The fighter coped with the task, and one of the conspirators, Pertinax, was appointed the new Caesar. He, in principle, was a good person and could become a pretty decent emperor because he abolished the draconian taxes of Commodus and gave more freedom to Roman citizens. But he did not bring money to the Praetorian guards, and they were offended by him. The guards guarding the emperor were accustomed to receiving from each new applicant a certain amount as a gift, called donative or donatvium. Praetorians are not bloggers for you. The reluctance to donate to them led to unpleasant consequences. Therefore, the Praetorians took and killed Pertinax and then announced an auction. Lot was the throne of Caesar and the whole Roman Empire to boot. The wealthy senator Didius Julian offered the highest price, 25,000 sesterces for a Praetorian, and he was declared the new Caesar. He ruled for only 2 months because he did not manage to pay off the Praetorians in time and did not guess to take a loan. On the 66th day of his reign, the guards, who did not receive payment, killed the debtor. Only the next emperor, Lucius Septimius Severus, was able to restore order in Rome. He became a good ruler and enjoyed the support of ordinary Romans. And he was not stupid because the first thing he did when he became Caesar was to dissolve the Praetorian Guard, replacing it with his own soldiers. 7. Britain and the U.S. went to war over the killing of a pig. In 1846, Britain and the United States divided the territory on the North American continent and signed the Oregon Treaty, which stipulated their borders west of the Rocky Mountains. The problem is that geography was then SOSO since Google Maps and mapping satellites had yet to be invented. So the contract turned out to be somewhat vague. There were no difficulties with the division of borders on land but on the water. In general, the two powers could not divide the tiny island of San Juan, and both declared it their territory, and forgot about its existence for 13 years. On one half of the island, the British Hudson's Bay Company established a sheep farm. On the other, American settlers grew potatoes. For a long time, they lived in peace until one unfortunate incident occurred. One day, an American farmer named Lyman Cadlar got up in the morning, went out into the street, and found that a giant black pig was ruining his garden and eating potatoes. Since this wasn't the first time this had happened, Cadlar freaked out, took his rifle, and killed the pig on the spot without a warning shot. Then, like a decent man, he went to the owner of the pig, the Irishman Charles Griffin, who ran the sheep farm, who told him what had happened and offered $10 in compensation. Griffin apparently loved the pig very much because he got angry and demanded at least 100. Cadlar refused to pay because it was the pig that invaded his territory. And when the British authorities threatened to arrest Cadlar in those tumultuous times, people often forgot about such a thing as a jurisdiction. He went for protection to the brave American warriors. Brigadier General William Harney, the commander of the Oregon Military District, took the message that American citizens were being offended, and he sent 66 soldiers of the 9th Infantry Regiment under the command of Captain George Pickett to protect the farmer. Seeing that a real military detachment had arrived on the island, the British also decided not to waste time on trifles and requested support in the form of 3 warships with Marines. The conflict escalated, and on August 10, 1859, on San Juan Island, 461 American soldiers with 14 guns prepared to take on 5 British warships with 167 guns and 2,140 men aboard. Fortunately, the Army commanders, American Colonel Silas Casey and British Rear Admiral Robert Baines, who learned what the fuss was about, decided that starting a war over a pig was stupid. Therefore, both ordered their men on no account to shoot first. For several days, American and British soldiers, sitting in positions, shouted all sorts of offensive things to each other, trying to provoke the enemy into aggression to get the right to bypass the order and use weapons. But not a single shot was fired. Upon learning of what had happened, high officials in Washington and London were horrified by the prospect of war over such a trifling matter and began negotiations. But then, inopportunely, the American Civil War began, and the negotiations dragged on for 12 years. All this time, American and British garrisons of 100 people held their half of the island of San Juan. The British left the island only in 1872. The Americans withdrew their troops in 1874. Thus ended the many years of Anglo-American confrontation on San Juan Island, the only casualty of which was a pig. 8. Canada and Denmark are still fighting over Hans Island. However, sometimes countries manage to conduct conflicts more peacefully. For example, Canada and Denmark cannot share the tiny island of Hans, which you can see above. Therefore, the so-called intellectual war is being waged on the island. Once every few months, the naval forces of Canada arrive there, plant the flag of their state on the island, absorb the stock of solid drinks left by the enemy in advance, celebrate the island's capture, and depart with victory. After some time, the Danes' military land on the island, set their flag, use the booze left by the Canadians, declare the island theirs, and sail away. This conflict has been going on since 1984 to this day. Danish sailors traditionally leave schnapps on the island, and Canadian sailors leave whiskey. The world would be much more fun if all wars were fought like this. Thanks for watching to the end. Like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications to catch all new videos.